nothing beats a story. And the story we're going to hear today is one of our fellow members of the Institute. The journey to become a CEO is actually one I think everyone in this room has been on, and it's not always a linear story, is it? It's not a journey that we can sit back and say, I predicted it was going to happen exactly that way, because it never does. To interview our fellow CEO member this morning, one of our chairmen is going to do the job. So let me first introduce Bernard and Carolyn. Please come up, guys. Bernard, as you know, Bernard is a business transformation specialist with over 30 years of global experience in multinationals. He's lived and worked in senior leadership roles in Australia, China and Malaysia. He's spent over 20 years contributing to academia and research as an adjunct professor. He regularly invests in and mentors many startups and is a frequent keynote speaker at the Lean Startup Machine. He's also the chairman, as we know, of Syndicate number 123. Bernard's going to talk today with Carolyn Fitzwater. Carolyn's been managing people and properties across a large, diverse and remote set of portfolios for many years. She thrives when implementing change. She thrives when she's implementing strategies to improve an organisation and always raising the bar to set new best practices. She's enthusiastic, she's motivational, and as a leader is collaborative. She's a strong legacy of developing teams and individuals that create and deliver outstanding, productive processes inside organisations to take teams to new levels with a view to always ensuring that customers are engaged as closely and as deliberately and as successfully as they possibly can be. To have us understand a bit more about Carolyn's journey, I'll hand over to our colleague Bernard. Bernard and Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tim, and welcome to the journey of growth at the CEO Institute. And a special welcome to you, Caroline, thank you for joining us for this session. Let me ask you, Caroline, how long have you been associated with the CEO Institute?
I first joined your syndicate, 123, in January 2015, so 3.5 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time ago. How did you find us? How did you come to know about the CEO Institute?
Through another CEO Institute colleague. So I'm now in Syndicate 60 with Carl Turner, which is a story we'll talk about. And Ian Wheeler is in Carl's syndicate. And Ian and I knew each other back in England. He was my manager in England. And when I came to Australia in 2008, pretty much not soon after that, he started talking to me about what a great opportunity and network this would provide for someone being new to Australia.
Fantastic. You weren't a CEO when you first joined us, nor in necessarily the general management sort of role. What was your role, and how did we look after you?
So I was working for Cushman & Wakefield, a real estate firm, and I was a director in the business. And for those of you in real estate, status is very structured in real estate. So a director of the business, I was identified by the CEO for Australia and New Zealand for future leadership potential. And so I reported into the managing director, who reported into the CEO. So then the CEO wanted to put me on a fast-track leadership. There were 5 of us chosen across Australia and New Zealand. So that was a lot of directors, regional directors and stuff to be recognised in. And I was able to fulfil joining the CEO Institute with Cushman & Wakefield's support, who paid for me and allowed me to come and participate and share in our cones of silence as we do.
That is absolutely wonderful. So you were a star performer for the company.
I was a star performer, but I think, in what goes around comes around. And to those of us that sometimes are probably on a fast track for leadership, it also worked to my detriment. And my managing director, my manager, had to make some redundancies, and unfortunately I was one of those people that was made redundant as a result of my success in the business.
Oh no. So you lost your job?
Yep. I understand the stats tell me that by the age of 48, the average employee has been made redundant 1.4 times, which was quite an astounding statistic. But I'd passed 50 and I hadn't been made redundant, so I suppose the law of averages, it was coming to me at some time. But I was told on the 29th of November that I was being made redundant on the 30th of November. And I'd been on the leadership fast track process. So I was anticipating a meeting with my manager to talk about getting the regional role we'd talked about. And unfortunately, it wasn't handled very well. There was no HR in the room. And what he actually handed me was a letter notifying me of my redundancy tomorrow.
Oh, goodness. So how did you cope with all that?
The typical psychological process you go through. The shock, I didn't believe that it was happening to me. I had 10 minutes basically to get my head around it before he'd finished my conversation and was inviting the next director in to have the similar conversation. So I went downstairs and had a few tears, called my husband, and basically said, I've just been made redundant. And he's gone really quiet for 2 or 3 seconds and then gone, excuse me, I'm going to swear now, fucking fantastic. Now, I'm the wage earner in the family. I'm the one with a career, et cetera, et cetera. My husband, bless him, is a handyman, and there's no way we could survive looking after our 2 children on the northern beaches on a handyman's salary. So I'm gobsmacked at his reaction. I go, but I've just been made redundant. And he's gone, get upstairs, get a box, pack your belongings and go. You know you're better than that. And whereas I was wanting the cuddle and the, come on, darling, give me some love, he gave me the kick up the backside that I needed. And within 24 hours, I turned it round to a positive because I was frustrated. I'd been with the CEO Institute that time for almost 2 years. I was aware of what I could do. And the leadership in the business were allowing me to do it, but my manager wasn't. He was taking all the good from me, and unfortunately was taking a lot of my good as his story in the business, and the leadership could see that. So my husband was quite right, is I could do better than that in a business, a better business. I made 3 phone calls. I had 4 interviews before Christmas and got offered 3 of the 4 jobs. And I think for any of those of you that are linked in with me on LinkedIn, is I wrote some articles on LinkedIn at the time, turning that into a positive. And, Bernard, Yvonne, Claudette, in the CEO Institute, you were, so supportive to me in that time. I took time out. I took a few months off to do nothing, but to annoy my husband, spending the redundancy, doing things around the house. Yeah, he's a handyman, but I have to employ someone to come in and do stuff. So I turned it round to my advantage, took some counselling, took mentoring, took the outsource package that was offered by Cushman & Wakefield at the time, and built the networks. And yeah, I'm sure you've probably got a question about the next step.
Yes.
But I couldn't have done it. I mean, Bernard, I remember ringing you, within the first week. And for any of you, I'm sure most of you do know Bernard or of Bernard, I rang him for a quick chat to let him know I'd been made redundant and put the phone down 1 hour, 15 minutes later. But you gave me some great grounding advice and ideas and how you were going to be able to help or how I could help myself.
And I think when we talk about crisis and crisis management, especially as CEOs, it's not just the company that goes through the crisis, the individual. And here we have a member of our syndicate who is going through a crisis. And the question is, how do you turn the crisis from an absolute disaster to looking at it with, hey, here's a possible opportunity? Because what Caroline didn't say was, for many months in our closed syndicate group, she had been talking about, where's my future? where am I going to go? And she was already questioning, looking at other opportunities. You see, at the future CEO, they're not CEOs yet. They're looking at, oh, I'm so close. I'm nearly there. And so we started talking about the opportunities that were out there. So where did you end up?
There's two answers to that question. So I indicated I had a number of interviews before Christmas. I'd actually got the audacity of my manager when he made me redundant, knew that on the 21st of December I was flying off to the UK for 5 weeks to go back home and see family. He made me redundant on the 29th of November and said, look, you know, if you get another job before Christmas, you know, we won't need to pay you out your redundancy. He knew I was going away for 5 weeks and I wasn't going to find another job. Oh, he also said, Caroline, he said, you're one of our top performers. By the end of July, you'd achieved your annual target. You know, I want to thank you for the hard work you've put into the business. Then when I looked at my redundancy payments, he hadn't included bonus. And it was the 29th of November. So I said, well, where's the bonus that I would be due as I hit my target in July? You're not entitled to a bonus because you're redundant. I fought that, and I got about 80% of my bonus in the end, but originally they weren't going to pay out the bonus. I think the process that we went through, the interview I had with Centre Group, where I am now, went really, really well. And the 21st of December, I got a phone call. I'm on my way to the airport. And Janine Frew, the HR director, said, look, really, really happy. You're our preferred candidate. I did 7 psychometric tests, and I scored really well in my tests. We just want to think about it over the Christmas break. And I got a phone call middle of January whilst I was in the UK to say, we've gone with a late entering candidate, a male electrical engineer, MBA qualified. Now, I don't have a trade. My trade, I started as a secretary, and I've worked my way up through my ability to talk to people. I didn't get the job at Centre Group, but I was in the UK. One of the other companies who were interested in me was a software company, and based out of the UK. So whilst I was in the UK, I said, I'll come in and see you. Went in to see them and got the job. I'm running a software business, selling software to government across Australia, and I was the head of Australia, New Zealand. On the 3rd of August, and I was doing well at this business, I was starting to turn it around, it needed some change management, and I got a phone call from Janine Frew, who said, do you fancy a coffee? So we met for a coffee, and within 5 minutes, she said to me, look, I'm not just here for a chit-chat. We actually made a mistake. We went with our head, not our heart. We've made a mistake. We'd be interested in talking to you about the position again. And for me, and we were talking earlier, Peter was mentioning about values. I mean, for the head of HR to fall on a sword, and it wasn't even in an interview, and say, we went with our head, not our heart, is the sort of firm that I believe in. And there's a lot of the core values match my core values in the business. Unfortunately, I was still in my 6-month probation with the IT firm and only had to give a week's notice. But I gave them 3 weeks' notice whilst they got someone to come over from the UK. And I started with Centre Group at the end of September, and I haven't looked back. They match what I want to do and how I want to do it. And I've always, you know, if I wake up in the morning and don't want to get out of bed and go to work, then there's a problem. And I'm a typical baby boomer. I'm in it for the long term. I don't plan to go in a job to move to something else, but progression within a company is great. I never felt like that in any of my jobs, but what I feel like working with Centre Group, and I noticed I was one of the last 3 standing in Carl's discussion, is it's going through a massive transformation across the business. Peter Allen is driving change into Centre Group, who are the owners and operators of Westfield. And my job now is the general manager for facilities. So I work in the design and construct team. And when our builders and developers and architects have designed these amazing Westfield centres, they give them to my team, and then my team run them hopefully as long and as effectively and safely and beautifully as I'm sure there isn't one of you that hasn't been in a Westfield Centre. Amazing company to work for. I'm very fortunate. And I'll be here until they take me out in a box.
That is so awesome. So tell me, Caroline, how did CEO Institute journey with you through all that, I guess, crisis, through to this dream job? I would call it a dream job that you now have.
Yep. I think CEO were intrinsic to the success of where I've ended up now. Yourself and the syndicate that we were with, we've seen a few changes in 1, 2, 3 with, for example, Rachel moving on up into a new syndicate. Some of our syndicate members are now mums. But I think what was handy is the ability to come into a room and talk and share as we do in the syndicates. It is, it's that cone of silence, and you can safely discuss what's on your mind. The ability to be able to pick up the phone to yourself, Yvonne, Claudette, when I needed to as well. I think when I was made redundant, the CEO also came to the table with me in terms of how they could help me with the payments and continuing to attend. I think you were very keen on making sure that I didn't drop the network that I'd built with the CEO and to keep going. And I certainly did. Even in the months when I was redundant, I was still attending the meetings. Now, tell me, is that something that you do for anyone in the CEO, Bernard?
It is, and it's not just me. I speak on behalf of all the chairs here. CEO Institute is a personal group. We're about not just the syndicate, but each of you. And that's very, very important, because each one of us here has a different journey, different challenges, but different joys as well that we can celebrate together. We in the Future CEO also have a WhatsApp group. We even post baby pictures. You mentioned some of our members have become mums. Well, we've actually got a member who's become a dad. James, you're out there. And it's wonderful to be able to share the joys of being a parent even and juggling with being a leader. And we've been able to discuss those things as well. But you're not with us anymore in the Future CEO. What has been also the change there?
So I joined Centre Group in September, and I found out that you and Claudette had been speaking about me before you or Claudette spoke about me. And I think you'd seen, one of my favourite expressions is you can't see the label on the cookie jar from outside. And you can't necessarily always see what's going on when you're in the middle of something. But I think you and Claudette had seen what I was recognising in myself. And at the annual summit in January this year, the first approach was made that maybe, Caroline, you should think about now moving into a syndicate that isn't a future CEO syndicate, but move in and work with other CEO syndicates. And I also understand that it wasn't just plucking out to see where there was a vacancy, but to see where I would fit into the right syndicate. And there was some work done with that, and then I met with Carl. And then you go through the process of the election still. So just because once you're in the CEO Institute and you've been nominated in and approved, there was still a process to go through with regard to the nomination. I mean, I can see Mel down in front, I didn't just get put into Syndicate 60 with Mel and the team, but there was a voting process still.
Oh, definitely.
So can you talk about that?
Yes. Look, we look at each of our members very personally, as I said, but that also means that each member, as they grow, we also recognize, hey, are they growing to the point that we can move them into another syndicate where they can continue to grow? We know that some members can stay in a syndicate for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or even more. But for some members, especially with the Future CEO, we recognize that their growth could also mean we can move you to sit with other CEOs and for you to continue growing. And that's why the Future CEO system is so unique and so wonderful. There's nothing like it. Our competitors don't have this sort of thing. But we mentor, we coach, we befriend, and our syndicates are also buddies going through the same thing of helping 2 ICs, 3 ICs, future CEOs to become great CEOs. And so when we see members where we recognize, I know you're not going to want to go. When you looked at me and I had said, would you like to think of going to a CEO syndicate group? You looked at me thinking I was crazy. And I remember you saying...
There is a little truth in that.
Oh, yes. I am a little bit crazy. But you said to me, but I don't want to leave the group.
Because I was comfortable. It was like a family. You know, we all knew the secrets around what happened in our offices. So to move into a syndicate where I didn't know people, it was another step. But Carl and the team have made me feel, you know, extremely welcome, and I don't feel like I haven't been there for very long. I actually feel very settled in the group.
Which is wonderful, because we are a big family. That's why with the summit that we have every year, now with the Connect program, we're able to bring our syndicates together. And what's wonderful with some of these events is we see Caroline, and she's as if she was still part of our group as much as she's part of Carl's group, which is a wonderful thing to have. Look, thank you very much for sharing your journey, your story with all of us. I'm sure some of you out there might have some questions for Caroline.
Well, also, as well as if I can encourage the room, is just because we're here and we're in the room, in the now, is can you think about those people that are following behind you that might need training, development, the opportunity just to be able to talk and think about the 2 IC, and maybe, I'm selling for you, Bernard, getting some more people in the future CEO syndicates, because it was a great help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline.
Pleasure.
I was actually going to pick you up on that very last point, because as leaders of organisations, you know, what is our biggest single job? It's actually about building great teams, and great people underneath us. And I actually did some research, and it's surprising that there's only a very small percentage of organisations who are members of the Institute who actually have you know, future leaders in the program. And it just begs the question, are we actually, you know, really focused on developing the next generation underneath us? And could this be an avenue to do that? If there was one thing, Carolyn, that you took out of your journey through this whole process, and it's not a, as you said, it's a typical journey. It's not an atypical journey at all. I didn't know that statistic, about 1.4 by the age of 48, but it's therefore a typical journey. What are the 1 or 2 gems that you took out of it that you pass on to people now when you talk to them about your journey and, you know, how your resilience took you through to where you are now?
I think one of the words there, Tim, would be resilience, is you build the confidence in yourself, and especially speaking as a female in real estate and construction. And I'm a general manager looking after a $49 billion portfolio. It's an amazing position to be in. So that the confidence through, whether it's the workshops that are conducted within the syndicates, whether it's the confidence through discussing these summits, you know, always give you a pointer. You never take away everything. You can't remember everything, but the 2 or 3 things you take away make you better. So it's opening the door to offer you support where you may not know you need support. And then the other bit is the ability to be able to talk openly in your syndicates about issues that arise that actually most of the other people in the syndicate have gone through maybe in some form or format. So that group think of, you know, the 8 to 10 people minds it's an amazing opportunity. And the ability to be able to continue those conversations one-on-one outside of the network.
Great stuff. We're going to move into morning tea, but before we do so, I'd just like to thank you both. Bernard, thank you for your insightful, as always, questions and energetic presentation style. And Carolyn, thank you so much. It's very authentic to open up and share a story like that. And authenticity, in my view, is one of the great fundamental tenets of a great leader, and you've just demonstrated that. So please join me in thanking Bernard and Carolyn.
Thanks, Bernard.